it's amazing how I think I was probably here, it was either late 2013 or early 2014. And so it hasn't even been 2 years. And in that short period of time, it is amazing what is happening all over the country. As Mike said, I originally came to you as a legislative liaison for the Convention of States project. We were working in Georgia to get an Article 5 resolution passed, called for a Convention of States that would allow the states to come together and propose amendments to the Constitution that we then have to go back out to the states for ratification, that would address reining in the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. A very bold task, as we saw. And when we ultimately went down to the state legislature in Atlanta in 52 days, from the day it was introduced to the day it passed, a record among the Article 5 movements in the country, we got it passed here in Georgia. Georgia became the first state to ever pass an Article 5 resolution. At the same time that I was down there were some other groups working, one of which was the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force. And although it took them 2 years to do it, they actually got the BBA, Balanced Budget Amendment Convention resolution passed. I'm going to tell you a little bit about and make these distinctions for you in just a second. So after we finished here in Georgia and got everything passed Convention of the States project-wise, there really wasn't anything left for me to do for them. So what I did was I basically kind of became a free agent like you have in baseball. And I went around and I knew and had met all the leaders of all the different Article 5 movements in the country and just basically put myself out there to help. And from that, I've gotten to know them. I've gotten to get familiar with all of the movements. I'm familiar with the different groups that are out there. There's groups of state legislators that have come together as part of this movement. I've gotten to meet with Congress and other people, been all over the country talking about this movement. And so I've had a lot of opportunities to see what's going on. And that brings me back, as I always say, you always go back to your roots. And it's a real honor to be here today to talk to you guys, because I'm back at where my roots are, right here in Floyd County, kind of where it started. Let's do a brief refresher. I know you know this, but let me give you a brief refresher. What is the Article 5 movement? The Article 5 movement consists of this. Under the Constitution, there's 2 ways you can amend the Constitution. One way is the way that we're all familiar with, where Congress, 2/3 of the houses, pass an amendment, like they passed that lawful 16th Amendment that allows for income taxation on a non-proportional basis among the states, or the 17th Amendment that provided for the direct election of senators, which has probably changed the balance of power more than any other amendment that's ever been passed. But those amendments were proposed by Congress. 2/3 of each house approved them, and then they were referred out to the states, and 3/4 of the state legislatures eventually ratified them, and they became part of the Constitution. Well, there's a second mechanism that you're familiar with that is what is the basis for the Article 5 movement, and that is the founders understood that there would come a time when our federal government would become so large, would overreach its power, would become something very different from what they intended in the Constitution. And that Washington or the federal government itself would not be willing to reduce its own power, would not be willing to restrain itself. So there had to be a mechanism for the states to kind of, and remember, the federal government is the child of the states, not the other way around. There had to be a mechanism for the states to send the child to the corner for a timeout and say, when you get things right, you can come back out and play. And that's what Article 5 is. It basically says that if Congress won't fix itself, the states can do it. And the way the states do it is the state legislatures, takes 2/3 or 34 state legislatures, they pass a resolution that says, we want, it goes to Congress and it says, we would like to hold a convention of states. That's a term that the Supreme Court has adopted and that the states have used since the very first application was filed in 1789. And it says we want to have a convention of states where the states come together, leaders from each of the states, and they sit down, and instead of Congress putting together the amendment and sending it out for ratification, the state leaders do that at this convention. So they would come together and they could propose literally, depending on what their call is for, they could go anywhere. The Convention of States project that we talked about, their resolution provides that if you come together, that they want to have a convention of states to do three things: to address fiscal restraints, to rein in the power and jurisdiction of Congress, and for term limits. And so that's one of the groups that's out there. As it turns out, there's 6 or 7 different groups out there. And what I have, that I'm going to ask Mike, or Spencer, or one of you guys to pass out, is this thing right here. It's the Article 5. It's called the Article 5 Convention Legislative Progress Report. And what this document is, it's something that I put together, that I publish every week, that is an update. It lists all the different groups that are out there that are working in the different legislatures throughout the country that are trying to get Article 5 resolutions passed. And so when you look at that document, you'll see on the left-hand side, these are the active groups that are trying to get Article 5 resolutions passed. The first group that you'll see is the BBA Task Force. That's the group that came in February and asked me if I would serve as special counsel to them and that I've been working with. And the BBA Task Force is a group of men. They started, it was a group of guys that came together. They're all volunteers. No one gets paid anything. A couple of gentlemen from Georgia, some really amazing people. One of the guys that's very active in the group is, for a living, he's got a consulting company that goes around the governmental entities and helps them balance their budget. What a great person to have on the balanced budget amendment task. Because the BBATF, what it is promoting is a convention of states to come together and resolutions to be passed by these 34 states. But they only want to call a convention for one purpose and one purpose alone, and that is to propose a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. That's what the BBATF is for. The second group you see there is the COS project, which I just talked about. They're a group, and they're going around the country, and they're trying to get the states to pass resolutions calling for an Article 5 convention for those three things that I mentioned. Fiscal restraints, which is essentially a balanced budget amendment, reining in the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and then the third item that they want is term limits. There's a third group that is there known as free and fair elections. That is a group which is largely, it's a very liberal, democratic-leaning group. And what they want is to see an amendment to address campaign finance reform. And interestingly, when I came into this process, I really wasn't in favor of that. I thought First Amendment, you don't want to put limits on it, etc. But the more that I've seen what's going on in Washington, and the more that I've seen the problems that we have in this country, the more I've been persuaded that we do need a form of campaign finance reform in this country. Not the kind that they're advocating, although it would include a lot of what they have. And I can come back to that in a moment. But they're moving around the country. Then I'm going to skip down all the way down to a group called Citizens Initiative. They're on there. They haven't been real successful, but they are proposing a convention to propose a single amendment. And that amendment would be what they refer to as the countermand amendment, which is essentially that any law passed by Congress or any decision, it would legalize nullification. What it would say is if there's any amendment passed or any law passed by Congress, any decision from the Supreme Court, that if the states, if 30 states, 60% of the states legislatures effectively vetoed it within a certain period of time, then that law would be repealed automatically, have the effect of veto, or that decision would be vacated. And so that's their group. So those are the four major groups that are actively involved. Now there's a fifth group that I refer to, that's referred to as the Compact for America. And they're kind of a diversion of this. Compact for America wants a balanced budget amendment, just like the DBA task force says. They go about it in two different ways. The process under Article 5 is 34 states call for a convention. Congress calls the convention. They say where it is and when it starts. The convention is held. They get together. They come up with an amendment. The amendment gets referred back to the states, and 38 states ratify. Okay, that's the process under Article 5. They've come up with a very unique process where they do it all in one. They go to the state one time. They've got a proposal. It calls the convention. It has the amendment in it that the convention would propose. And it says that if you get 38 states, which is the requirement for ratification, to pass this bill, then it automatically becomes an amendment to the Constitution. So it's kind of an all-in-one thing. It's very unique. It's very different. Congress has to also approve this process, which they haven't done yet. But that's a very unique group, but they're very, very, very involved and out there as well. There's a couple of other groups on here. You see Restoring Freedom. That's a group that's no longer active anymore. They've kind of combined into the Compact for America. But it's a group that wants an amendment, propose a convention to propose a single amendment. And that amendment would say that before Congress can raise the debt limit, it must get the approval of a majority of states. So that's a debt limit amendment that they're promoting. You see the Single Subject Amendment Act, they're just kind of getting started, but they want an amendment that says that any law passed by Congress must be on a single subject. 40 plus states have that rule already. And the idea behind that is it gets rid of all these special interest monies going out, etc. You don't have any more omnibus or omnibus bills. They have to do everything all in one. And then there's two groups that I have down there that are term limit groups. They want to see term limits placed on Congress. They want a convention for that purpose. And then the final group, Americans for Congressional Reform, that's a bunch of financial advisors, really great guys over in Texas. And they're just getting started as well. And they're proposing a convention for two amendments. One is term limits, and then the second one is that it's called the Equal Application Amendment, that any law passed by Congress has to apply to Congress. They can't pass a law and do it themselves. So as you can see, there's a lot of different groups out there. And when I finished up with Convention of States, I got out there, I tracked these people down, I called them up, I talked to them, and got to know them, and that's why I say I've been kind of a free agent out there. And what this particular thing, this particular report that you have in front of you, what you see is, this tells you all of the activity going on all over the country in all 50 states on all of these groups that are applying for a balanced budget or that are applying for an Article 5 convention. You see the first column is the states where these groups have already been successful and gotten the state to pass the resolution. And as you can see, the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force has been passed in 27 states. It only needs 7 more states to get to the 34th threshold to call a convention. In the second column, you see how active the groups have been in 2015. It lists all of the states where they introduced a resolution, they had someone introduce a resolution asking for their particular convention to be called. And then as you go across, you can see it either passed or didn't pass in the House Committee, in the House Chamber, Senate Committee, Senate Chamber. And then you kind of get a score that I just came up with on my own. It's like baseball box scores. People like to have numbers to compare things. So I came up with this. Not all of them, particularly the ones towards the bottom, appreciate it when I came up with that. But it's a way to kind of measure yourself and get an idea of how close are we to actually getting to a convention. And it's interesting, this thing I started publishing it in February, and I mean, it has just been picked up all over the country. Everybody interested in this. There's several state legislator groups that ask me if they can publish it every week when it comes out. I got a call from the Judiciary Committee in the House, which is responsible for calling the convention if they ever get to 34. And the staff of the chairman of that committee called, and he asked to be on the distribution list. So it's been kind of neat to be involved in that. The most preeminent constitutional scholar of the country, fellow I've become friends with by the name of Rob Nadelson, and he's the senior fellow at the Independence Institute in Colorado. And Rob has asked me, and he cited this and asked me to if he can use it in some of the work that he's written on. So it's been kind of a neat little thing. So the significance of this is just to say that this Article 5 movement has gotten huge. Since 2011, when it really kind of started to get cranked up, there was a couple of seminars, one at the Goldwater Institute and another at Harvard in 2010. That kind of got this thing cranked up and people moving forward with it, and these groups forming to move forward. But 2011 was really when the first group, the BBA task force, started really getting intense about getting these things passed. And since 2011, we've had 27 applications on different subjects passed in 26 applications passed in 17 states. So the fact that 17 different states from California to Georgia and Texas on the conservative side, the fact that these states have passed these kinds of resolutions in that short time tells you just how big and just how broad this movement has gotten. And a lot of the naysayer complaints that you hear, oh, it's going to ruin the Constitution, oh, it's going to be a runaway convention, and all these other things that I talked to you about the last time I was here, those arguments, they're still strong in some states, but they are gradually going away. People are saying that this can happen, this can work, and it needs to work. So that's kind of a summary on where the overall movement is right now. I would just add a couple of things to talk about. Over the last couple of years, some fairly significant developments have happened, in addition to just what you see here before you about how broad the movement is. One of them is that the state legislatures have come together and they've looked at and they realize we're getting close to maybe having one of these conventions. And what are we going to do about it? We as states need to prepare. So there's a group that has come together among the state legislatures called the Assembly of State Legislators, the ASL. There's another group that's called the Article 5 State Legislators Caucus. And both of these are groups of state legislators that meet periodically. And in particular, the Assembly of State Legislators, what they have done is they've come together, they form groups, and they're actually preparing now model rules for one of these conventions. So that if one of these conventions comes forward, there'll be a set of rules in place. We'll know ahead of time the way it's going to work, the way this convention is going to work. And it has provisions in it that make sure that we hold to what we know to be the standard, that each state appears, each state gets one vote. It's not based on proportionate delegates. It's based on one state, it's one vote at this convention. So if the states want to do something, it takes 26 states to vote to pass them, to propose an amendment, or 26 states to veto one, to not pass it, or not propose it. So we know that. We know that the convention itself sets the rules, and they're setting the rules, parliamentary rules and things of that nature. So we'll have everything in place when a convention gets called. And the states are doing exactly what they should be doing, which is asserting their authority over this Article 5 process and telling Congress to butt out, which Congress is going to do. Because the vast majority of states, although there's a few liberal states that have passed the free and fair elections resolution, The vast majority of states that are active with Article 5 are conservative states. Now, if we look at the layout of the states now, believe it or not, there are 31 states where both the House and the Senate are controlled by Republicans in this country right now. I'm including Nebraska in there, which is really 30 that have both houses, and then Nebraska, which has only a single house. There are 8 additional states where at least one house is controlled by the Republicans. And that's important because they have to agree on who goes to one of these conventions. So that makes for 39. Then on top of that, there's 4 more states, believe it or not. Maryland, Massachusetts, 2 others that escape me right now, maybe Illinois, and 1 other very liberal state, have Republican governors. So there are actually 43 states out of the 50 where one branch of government is controlled or at least balanced by the Republicans. So we know that if one of these conventions are held, the state legislatures are responsible for appointing the delegates. We know that it is going to easily be in conservative hands, one of these conventions. We know that. There's no way for it not to be. Some of the people will argue from the left, well, we're going to come in and we're going to get proportionate representation under the one man, one vote rule, although that constitutional principle does not apply to Article 5. Even if they did, we've run the numbers, and that convention would almost, even when you did that convention, and you did it on a proportional basis, about 2 to 1 would be the delegate representation, conservative to liberal. So we know that convention is going to be. So this group, the Assembly of the State Legislature, has been a great group. They're putting things together to control the convention. There's a second thing that has arisen over the last couple of years since we got started, referred to as delegate limitations acts. And they are actually, there's been one passed in Georgia, one of the most extensive ones in the country. And what this is if there is such a convention called, and, you know, God forbid, we all our state legislatures, all over the country get some Colorado pot and get high, and they appoint a bunch of liberals delegates to one of these conventions. These delegate limitations acts say that these people that go to these conventions, that they have to take an oath that they will stick to the subject matter of the convention and nothing more. They won't run away with it. And it goes further and it says, and if you violate that oath, your credentials are immediately withdrawn. You don't have a vote at that convention anymore. And then the third thing it says, moreover, when you get back to the state, you are subject to criminal fines and penalties. In some states, it's a felony. Thank God not in Georgia. But, I mean, you can go to jail. So the likelihood, let's say Georgia sent 5 delegates. The likelihood that Georgia would ever send 3 delegates who wouldn't be conservative, who wouldn't stick to the call, and who'd be willing to go to jail to violate it, is just so remote at this point. So these delegate limitation acts have come along, and they're wonderful ways of, again, ensuring that these conventions will stick to task and do what they're supposed to do. So those are the developments. Now I'd like to take just the last 5 minutes or so to talk about the balanced budget amendment. Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force, who I'm working for now, and we are hoping that next year, 2016, we will get the 34th state legislature to pass one of these resolutions calling for a balanced budget amendment convention. Where do we stand right now? Right now we stand at 27. How did we get to 27? Well, believe it or not, it goes all the way back to the late 70s. In the late 70s and early 80s, the conservative movement, eventually led by Ronald Reagan himself, pushed Congress very hard to pass a balanced budget amendment through the traditional way. And, of course, as I pointed out, and as we know, Congress wouldn't do it. They came close, but they didn't get They didn't even get a watered-down version passed. So Reagan then began to call on the states to pass Article 5 resolutions saying, well, by gosh, I'll go around Congress and I'll get the states to propose it. So the Article 5 movement really revved up in the 70s and 80s. It was led by some other issues as well. There was a movement to overturn Roe versus Wade, for example. But the Article 5 movement got going, and 32 states passed resolutions for a balanced budget amendment convention. Needed 2 more to get to the magic number. And what happened? All of a sudden, Congress passed the Graham-Rudman-Hollins Balanced Budget Act. And they did make some significant steps towards balancing the budget. And then things kind of died down. Reagan left office in 96, 97, 98. We had balanced budget, so it died down. So a number of the 32 states that had passed balanced budget amendment resolutions, they either expired by their own terms, or in a few cases, they rescinded them. They said, well, we don't need this, we don't need this anyhow. And so 16 of those 32 states, their resolutions either expired or were rescinded. So there were 16 that were left. Well, we know from constitutional law that those 16 remain valid as long as there's no limit on them, which none of them are. We know that because the 27th Amendment was actually proposed in 1789 and passed in the 1990s. It remains valid for that whole time. So we know that those 16 are valid. And since then, we've gotten 11 states to pass balanced budget amendment resolutions. So there's a total of 27 that are currently active. Now, if you look at that map that I just gave you, the green states are the states, including Georgia, where they've passed. We need 7 more states. Well, let me give you 6 of them. In the following states this past year, we had the votes to pass the resolutions. We had them in both houses. We didn't get the vote on them because in a couple of cases, there were other bills that got in front. The legislative process keeps it. They use these things as bargaining tools. There was a couple of states where leadership in the states were opposed to an Article 5 convention. They had John Birch Society constituents that were, particularly in their ear. But in these states, we have the votes now as we speak. We have them in West Virginia, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Wyoming, and Idaho. That's 5. It is going to be introduced later this year in Wisconsin, and we have the votes in Wisconsin. We think we'll actually get to 28 before this year is over. So that gets us to 33. Now, if you look at the states where we still have shots at it, you have very, very conservative Montana. You have Arizona, where we have the votes, but their state, the Senate majority leader is just totally opposed to it and has killed everything that's come up there. Whether we'll ever be able to find a way around him or not, we don't know. But we have Montana. Virginia, both houses are Republican. We've got the votes in the House. We need 1 more vote in the Senate to go over the top of Virginia. Kentucky's Senate is Republican. Its House is Democrat, but we're expecting that to flip this fall. So we've got a shot there. Believe it or not, we've got a good shot in Maine, which has a Republican governor and a Republican Senate. So we're kind of looking for that 34th state, but we believe that there are 3 or 4 states out there from which the 34 could come. Now the game plan is this. Again, we think we'll be at 28 by the end of this year. So the game plan is that first of next year, first few months of next year, we hit these other 6 states hard, and hopefully can get to 34, let's say by the end of April. What does that mean? Well, there's this other little thing, kind of annoying thing going on next year called the presidential election. Okay? Well, let me tell you, if we get one of these conventions called, it's going to be bigger than any presidential election. It's going to be the first time in this country we've had an Article 5 convention. You can wait for the media to go nuts. You know, Governor Brown out there in California is going to appoint Matt Damon to be a delegate, and they're going to be saying, here's the next George Washington. It'll be all over C-SPAN. It will be everywhere. The ideal situation would be to get to the 34th state by April, to have a convention called and convened in the summer. And what at that point is going to be the biggest issue in this country while there's this kind of election going on. It's going to be economics, it's going to be the balanced budget. And boy, doesn't that put the Republicans in a wonderful position to argue on that side. Now, granted, that's optimistic. You can sure as heck bet the Democrats are going to throw somebody out there to file a lawsuit and say, well, the 34 count doesn't really count because this resolution says something a little bit from this resolution, etc. So we may have some battles to do on that. But we think, based on the best constitutional law advice we've got, that we've got a strong argument that we can get this thing done. So that's kind of what our goal is. That's where we're at. It has just been, in working with the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force, you know, the key to a balanced budget amendment is not just the amendment itself. It's got to be done in a way that's right, that won't destroy the economy. And we've got some of the greatest economists in the country involved in this. They've come up with mechanisms. Basically, if it was done correctly, if Congress simply balances the budget in the same way, or if the amendment requires the budget to be balanced in the same way that Congress did it in the 90s, which is simply by reducing the rate of growth of government. That's it. You're not going to cut the budget. You're just not going to increase it as much as you need to. There's a way to do that over a certain period of time. We literally could pay off the debt within, it's still a long period of time because that's the easy way to do it. But like within some 50 to 75 year period, you pay off the debt, tax rates could come down something like 30%, all kind of wonderful things. Of course, when you get projecting out that far, we all understand that that's a projection. But these are coming from economists who don't want to wreck the economy. They don't want to see that happen. So there's plenty of ways to do this. It can be done without raising taxes. I know it sounds like a panacea, but it can be if it's simply done responsibly. So there's wonderful ways to do this. So with that in mind, Mike, I guess I can open it up for questions. One of the questions I know Mike asked me to address that I'll address. What can you do to be a part of it? Well, one of the groups that is working closely with us nationwide is the Tea Party Express. I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar with that group, Mike? Yes. They have teamed up with us nationwide. When we go into the different states, their chapters, their people are helping us go to the state legislatures and lobby and do the things that we need to do. And the best way for you to participate would be to go to the website, which is BDA, Balanced Budget Amendment, BDAtaskforce.org. Sign up, be a volunteer. There's, anybody in the crowd that has enough money to write a check for donation. It's Article 5. We ask $5 a month to help us get there. If we had the same money that some of the other groups had, this thing would already be going forward. But we are a group totally of volunteers. There's not a single paid person in our group. The only thing the money goes for is to defray expenses of flying me to Oklahoma or drive over to South Carolina and spend the night or wherever it might be that I have to go that particular time, and other people in our group. We are holding a summit in San Diego in July 25th and 26th, where we hope to either fly in or Skype in leadership from every house in the country and every Senate in the country, the state ones, to put together and agree to a resolution that when the DBA convention is called, it will be one state, one vote. It will stick to one amendment, proposing one amendment and one amendment alone, and that amendment will deal with the balanced budget amendment. Again, dealing with these runaway concerns that exist. So, that's the answer to that question. Otherwise, open the floor.
I do not have a question. I just want to tell you how much we appreciate your effort and all that you do and the time you give to get out there and get this organized and get this information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was my pay for the next year. Thank you very much. It was work. Yes, sir.
David Wright, the idea is these 27, I should talk about 27, they have the amendment proposed, they already written the amendment.
They do not have an amendment proposed. These resolutions simply say, we call, pursuant to Article 5 of the Constitution, we call upon Congress to call a convention of states for the purpose of proposing a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. They have different language they use, but words to that.
Those representatives from all states,
Mm-hmm.
so you get 34, but then all 50 states.
All 50 states will be invited to the attention, to the convention.
They will devise this balanced budget amendment.
The 50 states delegations voting on a one state, one vote basis. It would take 26 states to approve the language of a balanced budget amendment that would go out. There's been a lot of work already done on this, and certainly before that convention is held, there's probably half a dozen pretty good proposals out there. And what the convention would do would be basically to debate the different proposals to try to come up with the best one. I mentioned this Compact for America, which is kind of an all-in-one balanced budget amendment. They actually have the actual language of the amendment in their legislation. And it's a pretty darn good amendment. I'd make a few changes to it, but it's a pretty good proposal. And the great thing about it is these are proposals that have teeth in them. The concern is, well, Congress will just find a way around it. The way these things are written, there's not a way to do it. I mean, they have different things in it that, for example, one proposal out there says that if Congress can't reach a balanced budget amendment, then it becomes incumbent on the president to designate what's going to be cut to balance it. And if the president fails to do that, that's an impeachable offense. And if he does it and Congress doesn't like it, then Congress has so much time to change it. So it actually puts teeth into it that forces a balanced budget to occur. Hey,
David, let me get straight on the numbers. So it takes 34 states to call it. When we get to the convention, it takes a majority of 26 states to say what the exact words are of the amendment. And then when it goes back to the states, it takes 38 legislators to approve.
That's right.
Is that what we're saying?
You're absolutely correct. And let me say another neat thing about it that I didn't raise. Talk about if we got on this very optimistic schedule,
Right.
and got the amendment convention held and an amendment proposed, let's say by September of next year. There are two mechanisms by which amendments can be ratified. One, 26 amendments were ratified by, is the state legislatures vote on it. And if both houses by majority vote approve, the next state is approved. There's a second mechanism. And Congress gets to decide which mechanism is used. And this was the mechanism that was used for the repeal of prohibition of 21st Amendment. That it can be done by what's called a state ratifying convention, where the states themselves have people get elected to go to a state convention and vote whether that state approves it or not. Well, Rhode Island, which didn't bother to attend the 1787 convention that wrote Constitution kind of set the precedent for this. When the Constitution went back out to the states for approval, Rhode Island, it was to be approved by state ratifying conventions. And what Rhode Island did was they just held an election. And they let the people vote. And the people voted to adopt the Constitution, and that's how it became adopted by Rhode Island. Well, we could do the same thing. In November, we could be electing the president and at the same time voting to adopt or not adopt balanced budget. Now, wouldn't that put the focus big time on that economic issue? In other words, the states we could ask Congress to say, we want you to use the state ratification method for ratification, the state ratification convention method. And then the state legislatures could say, okay, we're going to use the method that Rhode Island used. We're just going to put it up for a vote in November, and if the majority of the voters approve it, that's our convention.
So each state, that would not, how each state ratified it would not be in the amendment put forward at the convention. Each state could do what it wanted to. I mean, they could either have the people vote on it and the legislature vote on it, or is that going to be?
Yeah, the way that works is this, Mike. The convention, the proposing convention,
Okay.
they propose the amendment, and it goes back to Congress. And then Congress designates which way it shall be ratified by the 38 states. They got to choose between one or two. They either say, we're going to let the state legislature ratify it, or we're going to use this state convention, ratifying convention method. We would anticipate that the proposing convention would say to Congress, we recommend that you use the state ratifying convention method. Congress isn't bound by that. We would recommend it. If Congress were to do that, then each state legislature gets to decide how to do its ratifying convention. One way to do it would be a vote of the people. Another way to do it would just be to say
Congress would set that. Congress would set.
Congress will set which method, and then it goes out to the 50 states if it's the state ratifying method. And the 50 states each decide for their state what the ratifying convention method is.
Here's one other thing, comment just in the last week or two about what you said, is that it's not that we don't have enough money, it means we're spending enough. In 2014, I think, I don't know whether that was fiscal year or the whole year, the federal government, for the first time in history, collected $3 trillion from the taxpayers. Never been that high. But they spent more than that, so they ended up on debt. And apparently, the first quarter of this year, for the first time ever, the federal government took in $1 trillion in a quarter, which would mean they're on the way to collect $4 trillion next year. So it's not that the country's going to die if we don't back the balance of our budget in that situation, because we're still taking in more than we've ever taken in before, and we're on the same way to do that again, even more. And so the idea that, the bill